Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Cycle Lab Coffee Time. Today we are live from the Performance Lab in Cycle Lab in Fourways, as usual, and we have a very special guest today. We have Ryan Gibbons, the professional South African road cycling champion who rides for NTT Pro Cycling Team. Recently just done the Tour de France and back in South Africa on a little bit of a break. Ryan, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be back in South Africa and great to be here.
How long are you here for? Are you...
Usually I get about 2 months off at the end of the year. Obviously this year with COVID, things are changing a little bit. Normally I'd have a training camp in Spain or kind of an orientation camp to meet the team, find out about the new sponsors and that kind of thing. But this year with COVID, I'm actually not sure. So as it stands, I'm kind of living every day by day, but realistically I should be here until the end of the year.
Your parents must be proud of you, eh? South African road cycling champion, riding the Tour de France.
No, definitely they are. I mean, they've always been my biggest fans and they've taken me to bike races from when I was 12, 13 years old. So I think to kind of reach the pinnacle of the sport with Tour de France, as much as it meant to me, I think it meant a lot to them too.
Brilliant. So, I mean, you just mentioned COVID. It's been a very strange year for you in terms of being a professional cyclist and athlete. I mean, you guys haven't done the normal races at certain times of the year. You did a whole bunch of virtual racing kind of during COVID.
Yeah.
How was that? Was it something that you enjoyed?
I really did. I mean, Zwift is a platform that I've used once or twice prior to this COVID, and there's so many other virtual racing and training platforms out there. But obviously during COVID, I was forced to do it, and I really took a great liking to it. It comes down to a bit of tactics, but it's more so just strength. And I think a lot of the riders in the peloton, are potentially stronger than others, but they just kind of don't get to show it because of team tactics or maybe just their bunch skills. Where this kind of was man on man, and I thoroughly enjoyed that. And even though with COVID kind of relaxing in Europe, what it did during the summer months, the virtual racing died down a bit. I have no doubt that it will kind of continue in years to come.
Brilliant. So you are the national champion. You won that title in February against you sprinted Daryl Impey. You just put him on the line there. When you represent the flag and the jersey in Europe, what does it actually mean? Do you get special privileges? Is it?
It's very special to be the national champ. I mean, I think everyone first and foremost sees you because you're wearing a different jersey. You're wearing, your brand, your trade team jersey with the national flag on it. So you do stand out. You get
Sorry to interrupt. You're grabbing our coffees here.
Thank you very much.
There you go.
We've received our new Cycle Lab Coffee Time mug, so it is going to be the best tasting coffee you've ever had.
I have no doubt.
Only because of the cup.
No, of course.
Sorry to interrupt there. Okay, you're telling us about the national champs jersey in Europe.
Yes, I mean you do stand out as a national champ, and a lot of the races, they line the national champs and European continental champs at the front, the world champ at the front. So for example, this Tour de France, stage 1 of the Tour de France in Nice, I got to line up on the front row, and privileges like that, it's quite special, and everyone knows who you are, and commentators speak about you a bit more, so you do stand out a lot more. Naturally that comes with pressure because
sure.
If you drop, the camera's going to come to you and they're going to say, this is the national champion Ryan Gibbons dropping, so there's a bit of added pressure,
Okay.
but definitely there's a lot of pride and privileges that come with it, and I was very, very proud to wear the jersey in Europe this year.
The life of a pro cyclist. You wake up in the morning, you have a cup of coffee, I'm guessing. What is your daily routine like? There's obviously different phases in your training and
sure.
leading up to a race and so on. Typically, let's say, like if you're picking for a race like Paris-Roubaix or like one of the big classics, what would your typical day-to-day routine be building up to a certain race?
So, I mean, obviously as a professional athlete, you stay fit and you watch what you eat in season, but when it's coming to a big event, you really, really are quite particular. So, I mean, I will wake up in the morning, I'll try and do a light core session, not too strenuous, obviously, because I've got the workout to do that day, have breakfast. Also, what's very, very different to being in Europe and in South Africa, most of the riders, you leave your home at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock in the morning. In Europe, you don't. No race starts before 11 o'clock in the morning. So you want to kind of condition your body. You want to know what it feels like to eat at 7 o'clock because you're going to be racing 3-4 hours later.
Sure.
So I would then have breakfast about 8 o'clock in the morning. And then almost wait, even if I finished breakfast at 8:30, I'd kind of delay my training until about 10 o'clock.
Sure.
You want to acclimatise to the heat and just get used to riding over the middle of the day.
It makes you skip lunch so you can lose weight.
Well, that's a trick. And then a standing training ride, will be anything from 4 hours to, it could go up to 7 hours these days. People are getting quite serious, and if you don't do the same, you're going to fall behind. So a day with different intervals, whether it be hill climbs,
Sure.
short intervals, VO2 max efforts. or get home, have a recovery drink, and then, like you say, maybe make a smaller lunch, and then a big part of being a professional athlete is also recovering and resting. So people think often, you bike riders are lazy because you do a bike ride and then you sit on the couch all day, but that's actually part of it,
Part of the job.
It would be nice to go walk around and go to the mall or do something, but you've got to recover and then kind of relax, do a stretch in the afternoon, and then make myself a relatively healthy dinner. But again, when it's in season, I pretty much count every calorie.
Wow. So it's not as glamorous as what people think it is, or is it actually quite fun?
It is fun. I mean, obviously, I'm living the dream. I'm a professional athlete. I'm doing what I love on the world stage. But yes, you are living in a foreign country. You are away from friends and family. A lot of people think that, you're living in these amazing hotels. And yes, at races we are spending times in some nights in some races we are at lush hotels, but very often we aren't. And again, when you are in heavy training blocks, and again, with this year with COVID, with there being travel restrictions, I was alone, away from friends and family, away from my fiance for 6 months.
Congratulations!
Yeah, thank you.
Recently got in.
I did. Yeah.
Dropped the knee.
Who would have thought? But yeah, there are a lot of challenges and struggles. But again, at the end of the day, I wouldn't change it for a thing.
Let's move on to the Tour de France. You started your very first Tour de France this year. That's kind of the pinnacle of the sport. Every youngster growing up wants to race the Tour de France. You've done 2 other Grand Tours, right? You've done the Giro.
I've done the Giro. I've done 3 times, and I've done the Vuelta once. So I've done the other 2.
But not the Tour de France.
Not the Tour de France.
Is it as spectacular as everyone makes it out to be, or is it just another race?
At the end of the day, it is just another bike race. You line up, and you've got to get over these mountains, and there's a finish line, and there's a little bit more hype around it. And I think this year with COVID, it was a little bit smaller. But in terms of doing it for the first time, I had these huge expectations, but to be 100% honest, I thoroughly enjoyed my first Giro a lot more, and even the Vuelta a España I did in 2018, I thought that was a lot tougher. So at the end of the day, it is another bike race. I think it's just the media and the world make it out to be this amazing thing, and of course it is. It is the biggest sport, the biggest event in cycling. But from a rider and kind of, from my perspective, I just found it to be another race.
That's quite interesting.
Yeah.
Was there like a little bit of a twist on things with COVID and having to kind of wear masks? And because I actually brought up a picture of you there. Let's just bring it up again. At the team presentation. So there's you guys wearing masks. There's you giving a little high five, Quebecer high five there. Were there restrictions where you guys had to like stay indoors and kind of look after yourselves? Did you guys take that quite seriously?
No, so we had to. So the UCI kind of ensured that all the teams followed quite strict measures. So before every UCI race you did, 6 days before you had to have a COVID test, 3 days before you had to have a COVID test, and then you'd kind of be welcomed into the bubble. And then at these races, they'd ensure that every team kind of had their own hotel, or if they were sharing hotels, that you'd have your own floor at the hotel. Normally you'd have shared dining halls where now everyone ate separately.
Okay.
Mechanics had to wear masks at all times. We had to wear masks at all times, even in our buses, presentations. So they were very, very strict. And that did obviously, it was a new dynamic, and I think it maybe took away from the experience for me a little bit. But again, it was part of it, and that was what we all had to do. And I'm very proud of the UCI for kind of enforcing it and ensuring our safety as best as possible. But yeah, definitely was a strange year all around.
You started the Tour de France with 2 broken ribs. How is it even possible? I mean, I don't know, the commentator announced it, but how bad was it actually when you started?
It was really bad. I mean, so I crashed a week prior to that into a Wallonie in Belgium, and I broke my ribs. And initially I knew exactly what had happened, but obviously you don't want to go for the x-ray because then, it's real. And then obviously team doctors and medical staff kind of think, okay, maybe we should change your program. So I'd obviously known that I was doing this Tour de France in a week's time, crashed in Wallonie, and a day later we said, no, we have to go for x-rays, which I did, and we found to have 2 broken ribs. So initially they said, well, there's a good chance you're not going to do the tour now. So I took 2 days really, really easy, but again, it's a Tour de France, so I said, no, I can do this, I'm going to be fine. And you dose up on paracetamol and caffeine, and you try and you do your thing. And then stage 1 happened, and I happened to crash again on the same side and broke a further rib. So the whole Tour de France for me was challenging.
It was broken ribs.
It was broken ribs. So breathing was painful. Just simple things like getting an energy bar out your pocket was hard, or fetching bottles. I mean, I couldn't fetch bottles for my teammates because I couldn't do it. Even reaching down for a bottle or riding over a corrugation was really, really tough and painful. And I think I didn't give myself the opportunity or the time to recover, so it just kind of got progressively worse. And that's also why the Tour de France was my last race of the season. I was supposed to do the classics afterwards, but I finished the tour and I was in a lot of pain and I just wasn't healing, and I think that was because I pushed my body for a month with multiple broken ribs.
Crazy. And staying on the topic of crashing, I know it's not really a nice topic to speak about because crashing is not fun, but it is part of the sport.
100%. Yeah.
Does it make you scared to kind of touch elbows with Peter Sagan in the sprints, or is it something that you completely just have to block out?
You have to block out. I think as a sprinter, you're a little bit, I don't want to say braver, but that's part of your job. It's part of your trade. You are going to touch elbows. You are going to crash. It's not like if it is going to happen. So you are, I wouldn't say prepared for it. I mean, no one's ready to crash. No one wants to crash, but it's part of it. And if you riding in fear, or if you're trying to, take the safest line every time, you're never going to get a result, and you're not going to perform. So it is part of it. And I think being a sprinter, you are going to crash more, and it is going to happen. But it's one of those things, and you kind of just put the blinkers on and go.
Last little question on crashing. I'm bringing up this photo here for guys to see. At the Tour of Poland, it was on TV, we did watch it, and there was probably one of the worst crashes in cycling history that happened. Yeah. And for some reason we were watching your blue helmet and your white kit, and you somehow entered a loophole which made you dodge that crash. Were your eyes completely closed? How did you get through that situation? It was nuts.
I mean, like you said, it was a very, very horrendous crash, probably one of the worst, and some of the riders involved still haven't raced again or ridden a bike even since. Prior to that happening, about 10 kilometers before the final, the finish line, I'd also crashed, previously. So I just got back to the group with about 4 kilometers to go, battered and bruised, and coming into the sprint, I was still trying to make my way forward. And I could see what was happening in front of me. It was a downhill sprint in Poland, stage 1, it's always the same, and we were going about 80 kilometers an hour. I had a 58 chainring on.
Gee, 58?
58 chainring, and so absolute crazy speeds. And I could see what was happening, and that they were both, Jakobsen and Groenewegen were drifting to the right. And if you look at the helicopter shot, you'll see that I actually started braking. So I was probably moving into fourth, even third position at the time, but I think because I crashed previously, I was a little bit nervous. I did start braking and veering left even before the crash. And even then the crash happened and barriers were all over the place and bodies were flying. I still happened to navigate through it somehow. I don't know how. I think it's because I'd already crashed, So I'd done my crash. I didn't need to crash twice in one day. But very, very grateful to miss that.
So maybe the first crash actually saved you.
And that's exactly what a lot of people, my whole team said, Ryan, had you not crashed, you would have been a bit braver, you would have gone for it, you would have been fresher, you probably would have been in a different position. So I think that first crash actually saved me.
You are a sprinter by trade, definitely not a climber.
Thank you.
But when you're going over those massive mountains in the Tour de France and the Giro, you still have to kind of ride hard to get to the finish without being eliminated. Is it actually that tough to make elimination every day, or is it something that people group together and there's a gruppetto and
So that's a misconception with cycling, and that's the sprinters can't climb, and I mean we can't climb as well, but all of us can climb, and all of us train on the mountains, and all of us are able to do 6 watts a kilo for an hour. So if you put us in domestic racing or the continental level, us sprinters will be the best climbers. So it is not easy. What makes the Tour de France a bit tougher is that the time cuts and the time limit is a lot less. So in the Giro, for example, they take the winner's time and they add 30%, and that's the time cut. Where in the Tour de France, it's a lot less. It's sometimes 10%. So there's a lot of stress around that. And yes, the riders do kind of rally together, but very often it's kind of every man for himself. And there's also that idea of, well, I'm a sprinter, you're a sprinter. If I drop you today and you miss time cut, you're not going to be here in the sprint tomorrow, and then I've got a better chance. So as much as the guys do rally together, there's always that kind of, it's never easy. And again, when I was watching the tours when I was young, thinking, these guys, they get drops and they're just cruising to the finish line. Where now I realize it's not easy, and every day it's a fight and a race to the finish line.
We do have some really cool things that we're giving away today. The first one is a set of Giro gloves. Another one is a signed cap from Ryan, and as well as a Cyclab signed jersey. So what we're going to do is the best question that someone posts for Ryan will get the Cyclab signed jersey.
Who decides if it's the best question?
I think you can decide. Yeah.
Oh gosh.
There we go. So it is a live show, as I mentioned, so you guys can get your questions in the Facebook live feed there, and we can ask Ryan a couple of questions. I haven't been looking at.
We will also give an option to our Instagram followers.
And also the Instagram followers as well when we post this video a bit later. So the best question for Ryan will get that Ryan Gibbons signed Cyclab jersey. Ryan, I'm going to bring up a few sprinting pics here. Yes, that's a beautiful picture. So, you in the front there at that moment. I mean, a lead-out training in cycling is very important when it comes to getting results and being the difference between 10th place and probably in the top 3. Can you take us through kind of the mindset and the feeling of kind of the last 3 kilometers of a sprinting stage? Is it like, I mean, everyone's grouping together, there's corners, like it looks so hectic. Can you take us through your mind process?
It's an absolute blur. I mean, the last 3Ks, because first and foremost, you're at your absolute limit. You know, you're riding at 500 watts or whatever it is, you know, so you're absolutely, you know, you're struggling to breathe, you're struggling to see straight. And on top of that, you've got to navigate around bike riders, around corners, dodging barriers, things like that. As you mentioned now about a lead-out man, it does differ. I think if you're a rider with a lead-out trainer or lead-out rider, all you're focused on is that man in front of you. And you trust him, you kind of watch to see when he brakes, how he's taking a corner. And, you know, you're obviously aware of how far it is to go, you know, the 300 meters, 200 meters, 100 meters to go kind of thing, but you're following that wheel. A rider like myself, who I've never ever had a lead-out trainer or a lead-out rider, I'd say it's more challenging because the whole time you've got to, you know, try and choose what's the best line and what's the best rider to follow, and on top of that, you know, the corners and where to brake and which is going to be the quickest line. So on top of being, you know, absolutely you know, filled with lactic acid and struggling to breathe, and your heart rate is 190, you having to think. And I think that's the difference between great riders and riders who are kind of consistently 4th, 5th, where the guys who are winning, you know, if it's not because of a lead-out trainer, it's just because in that moment they're able to think clearly and you know, the instincts take over and they take the quickest line, or they make the right decisions. So, I mean, I can't kind of tell you what I'm thinking with 1K to go or 2Ks to go. It's an absolute blur. But it's definitely what I live for, and the reason I'm a pro cyclist is because those feelings and those emotions you experience in that last 3 kilometers, you can't explain it, and it's unlike anything else.
So it's not like in the last 500 meters you're next to Julian Alaphilippe there and you're like, hey, this guy's cool, you know, you like touch him, you're like with your elbow, you're trying to push him out. It's actually just a blur. You're just focusing on what you're doing.
You're not looking, I mean, obviously you're following certain riders who you think would be the favourites, you know, the Sam Bennett's, the Peter Sagans, but very often, you know, they're all rivals and they're in your way, and, you know, you're not starstruck and you're just trying to get around bodies.
Very cool. We have a question here from someone in the on Facebook Live. We're going to is asking, what is the most fundamental aspect of a bike fitting? So what's the most important part
of a bike fit?
Yeah.
I mean, that's hard. I think there are so many. I think it starts with the cleat setup. You know, again, depending on your level of riding, some riders, you know, when you start cycling, you don't wear cleats. Obviously, then I think it would be more saddle height. But if you kind of a fairly recreational cyclist, or you do it fairly often, I think it's so important. The fundamentals would be your cleat setup, I think your saddle height, obviously your stem length, and you know, it's the 3 contact points, so your feet, your bum, and your hands, from my opinion. You know.
From your professional bike setup career.
Yes.
Actually, you used to actually do bike setups.
I did do bike setups, yeah, with cycle fits, prior to being a professional cyclist.
Your journey to getting to the top level of the sport, it was an opportunity you had with obviously your current team. Was it quite a smooth process? And if someone wants to get to where you are, what's the easiest or quickest or most reliable way to get there? Because there is a lack of opportunity at the moment with I mean, obviously getting to the top of the sport with not many road races in South Africa. So what's your recommendation?
You know, I think with cycling, that's a very, very good question, and that's the problem with cycling. It's not like cricket or rugby, where there's, you know, you go from school rugby to club, you know, you have these academies and you kind of work your way up. There's nothing like that in cycling. And it's pretty much hit and miss. You know, I've raced against riders in the past who are phenomenal riders, but it's just kind of wrong place, wrong time, or they have a bit of an attitude, or they get injured at the wrong time and they don't make it pro. Yes, I was fortunate, you know, I was racing in South Africa, got an opportunity to race for local teams here, but then in order to kind of make that next step, I did have to win, and, you know, in 2015, I think it was, I did win a lot of races in South Africa, and that gave me the opportunity to race one step up in a continental level team with Dimension Data at the time. But even then, you know, you're just a small fish again, and in order to kind of get that next opportunity, I had to do something, and you know, after 6 months of being in the continental team, I thought, you know, this is way too hard. I'm living away from friends and family. I'm training 6 hours a day just to do races in the rain and to get DNX and come 50th. This isn't fun. And yeah, I'd say midway through the year, I nearly packed it in. But then a month later, I did the under-23 Giro and I won the Sprinters jersey. And that just kind of started opening up more doors and confidence. And then, one thing led to another, and I got a guest ride with the World Tour team, and then I joined the World Tour team. But then to answer your question, what's the right avenue or path? There is none. And that's where it's so hard for young riders, because it's not just like, I need to tick this box and get to that level and then tick this box. There's nothing like that. All you have to do is just stay determined, keep training, keep racing, do as much as you can, try and race in Europe if you get the opportunity to. Obviously, it's very expensive, and it's your parents or yourself are going to have to foot that bill. But in order to make it, you're going to have to keep on knocking on that door. And unfortunately, in South Africa, the only real opportunity you get is if you maybe win the 94.7 or the Cape Town Cycle Tour or SA Champs. But it's just perseverance. Ultimately, it's perseverance and never giving up.
What kind of makes you valuable as a rider? Like, is there, obviously there's a ranking system. So the more kind of races you win, the more points you get, and then people or teams will be interested in signing you. Do riders get a bit selfish at times when they're kind of needing points when they don't have contracts?
100%. So, back in the day, you'd have, a team would be made up of the riders who were getting the results, the race winners, and then the workers. So kind of a worker domestique would be someone who'd be riding on the front all day, sitting in the wind, pacing, doing lead outs, things like that, fetching bottles. But now racing is getting so competitive, and even you see the big teams like Quickstep, every single rider in that team is capable of winning. So that you kind of can't rest on your laurels and be a worker anymore. Yeah. So you have what you say is that value, those UCI points, and every rider, at the end of the day, at the end of a year, you're ranked based on those points you accumulate. And if I know that, I actually don't have that many points and there's only a few races left, why would I ride for someone else if, that means them getting points and me not getting a contract? And of course, you're a professional bike rider at the end of the day, you're a professional sportsman, you do your job, you've got to do what you're told. But I think it does wear on some riders' minds often, and I think that's why we are seeing, cycling is changing, and it's purely because everyone is almost pressured to be able to win a race and to be at their best at all times. But I think, it's changing so much. I think it's great, it's good to see that the sport is developing and growing, but it's so unpredictable. And, you're seeing youngsters winning and things that, you haven't seen in the past. So it's exciting, and I'm grateful to still be in it, especially after these hard times.
As a youngster, this is from Mark Hawkins, as a youngster, what discipline of cycling did you do? Was it track, was it mountain biking, was it road, or have you always been a road cyclist?
I actually started as a mountain biker. When I started cycling, my parents would always go to these mountain bike events, and I'd kind of tag along and do the 20k ride or the 40k ride, the fun rides or the half distances. And I thought to myself, I'm never going to be a roadie. That's quite boring. You watch road cycling on TV, and yes, the final, few minutes is exciting, but the rest is quite boring. You're looking at scenery, and I don't want to be part of that. But as I kind of developed, I saw that there was more opportunities in road cycling. I love mountain biking. I started cross country and then went towards more marathon when I was kind of late teens. But I'd say from 17, 18, I really saw more opportunity on the road, and that was kind of when I made the move across.
Next year, your contract's coming to an end. Let's just touch a little bit on that. I know we don't want to focus too much on it, but NTT's been amazing to you. You've been with them for?
5 years. This is my fifth year. So yeah, formerly Dimension Data for I think 2 years or 3 years, and then, I lied, 4 years, and then this last year was NTT.
Okay, and then before that, you're part of the same kind of continental setup. So you've been with them for a very long time. They've done lots for you. The whole 100%. Quebecer charity, that plays a fundamental role in your team, and obviously giving back to cycling and the whole development side of things. Who are you riding for next year?
So next year I'm with Team UAE Emirates. Very, very exciting. They're the Tour de France champions. So it's going to be a great opportunity, great experience. I'm very much looking forward to it.
So not so much pressure?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a lot of pressure. I think to kind of make selection now is going to be a lot tougher. It's going to be different. But you're going back to NTT and Dimension Data. I'm very, very grateful for what they've done in my career. They've got me to this level, and I'm going to be forever indebted to what they have done and created for me. And then going back to what you mentioned about Quebecer, riding for a charity and a cause like that, it really, it sounds quite cliche, but it really gives you that extra boost, and it means so much to you. And I think even moving away from this team, Quebec is always going to be something that I would love to contribute to and be part of. So it is sad to see NTT potentially coming to an end now, but I have no doubt that they've changed many people's lives, and they will continue to be changing lives in the future.
Up to now, your best, proudest cycling moments, cycling achievements, just off the top of your head. I know there's probably many.
Probably the first one, 2014. in south of Joburg. I think it was.
You haven't won the 94.7 or the Argus yet.
I haven't. No, so clearly I'm not a pro rider yet.
No.
Winning SA Champs was obviously very special. I thought I deserved it a few years ago, the last 3 years actually, but things happen. So to get that win, I'm very grateful for it. And again, to take it off someone like Daryl Impey's shoulders, who's been an absolute icon and such an inspiration for South African cyclists all around, and such a great guy. To kind of him to pass the baton to me was really a special moment in my career. But I think to name one victory would be the Tour de Langkawi. I just turned professional. I was still wet behind the ears. Didn't know what I was doing. I went to this bike race.
I remember that day. Well, I remember
that experience. And I went to that race kind of not knowing what's going on. With all these pro riders around me. I was still, I think, 21 years old, and I won a stage there. Was in the yellow jersey and ended up winning it. And riders like Egan Bernal, who won the Tour de France last year, he was behind me. And to kind of looking back at it, I actually don't know how it happened, but as my first professional race and to get a win was something quite surreal, and I think that will always go down as something very, very special.
Future, something that you want to achieve next year with your new team?
I was very ambitious when I started cycling, so if you asked me, 4 years ago, I would say, of course, I want to win a classic, I want to win 5 stages of the Tour de France. Now that I'm getting a bit older and I'm also, getting a bit more realistic, I do believe I'm capable of winning at the highest level, and I think I have proven it once or twice, that there's potential there. But I think for me a big thing would be to get consistent wins at World Tour level races. I do believe, like I said, that I'm capable of it, and I think having a bit more opportunity, but also having support is going to be fundamental in attaining that. Something I think where potentially just been lacking is having that support, and I think that will definitely make the difference. I'm hoping it will. So I'd like to win, a few World Tour races, and then, who knows? I think that the dream of mine is obviously to win a classic, to win Gent-Wevelgem or Flanders or even Roubaix. I don't have great memories at Roubaix the previous times I've done it, and then I think Grand Tour stage wins is obviously, Tour de France would be the pinnacle.
Amazing. So we're running out of time, so we're going to have to wrap it up. I see time just flying. But before we do that, we've got 2 prizes to give away. It's a signed Ryan Gibbons cap. I think that's pretty cool. So the question to win this cap is, would you like to make the question?
No.
Okay.
You make the question.
What cycling team is Ryan riding in 2021? Get your answers in, and we'll pick a winner. Second question is for a set of Giro gloves. Those are quite cool. They match your jersey. I actually thought you were one of the Cyclolab employees when you walked in here today.
No, so did I. I walked in and everyone was very friendly to me. Cyclolab, everyone's always friendly here, which is great. But I think even more so because they thought I was part of the staff. But yeah, you're right at home here.
Okay.
I've got a question. Okay, so what bicycle will I be riding? What brand of bicycle will I be riding next year?
That's a good question. Hopefully, Cyclolab sell it. So there it is. What brand of bicycle will Ryan be riding next year, and what team will you be riding for next year? And then the best question of the day, we won't announce it today because we have to post this video on Instagram and so on. A Cyclolab signed jersey by Ryan. The person who posts the best question for Ryan will get their hands on a signed jersey. Before we end off, I just got to do a few announcements here. Cyclolab are running the Yes Vember promotion, which means when you go to checkout, you must use your My Cycle Life profile, and you can get either 50 Rand or 500 Rand off your purchase, but definitely 50 Rand. So that's kind of luck of the draw. If you rock up at the till using My Cycle Life profile, you can get up to 500 Rand off your purchase.
Will you come shopping at Cyclolab, Ryan, with the Yes Vember?
Oh, definitely. That's all the reason more to do that, and you'll see me in your aisles definitely in the next few weeks.
Yeah, if you need a tube or something. Yeah, come.
No, definitely.
Come shop. Yeah. And then the second promo is the Cyclolab Black Friday special is coming up at the end of the month, and you can get up to 70% off. The deals are so hot we can't even run them for longer than a week because there's going to be no stock. So definitely the Black Friday is coming up, so have a look out for that. So let's head over. Ryan, thank you for coming and joining and chatting. Last question, your very close friends call you the Moose. What is the reason behind that, or is it just an animal that you've been inspired by?
I think there's many reasons. I crashed a lot this year. I think in every race I did, I crashed multiple times. Yet I still endured, and I finished everything I started. So I was resilient, and the moose is a resilient creature. It's quite hard to take down. So yes, that's one of the reasons, but for other reasons too, I'm quite hard to take down.
Brilliant, thank you. Keep inspiring, and hopefully we can catch up next year. Good luck with your training. When are you leaving again for your training camp?
So I'm not actually sure, with these COVID regulations in place, we're not sure. So hopefully, there's an opportunity or chance in December, but more likely than not it will be next year from January. So I'll be here for a while. So if you are out on the roads in Johannesburg around the cradle, I'm sure you'll see me in the weeks to come.
Stop for a coffee.
Definitely.
Thanks guys, thanks for tuning in. Like I said, keep inspiring, keep motivating, and thank you.
Of course.
You're actually a nice guy.
Thanks for the coffee.
Yeah, thanks guys. Tune in next week, same time, same place. See you soon.
Gotcha.